Politicians, diplomats, journalists, and the president gathered in a ballroom for the annual White House Correspondents Dinner. And then this happens. Panic cuts through protocol. Guests scatter. The president's still unaware of the imminent danger. First off stage, Vice President J.D. Vance. Next, Donald Trump, who appears to stumble slightly as the Secret Service takes control. Tonight was supposed to be Trump's big return, a president who has long attacked what he calls the fake news media, has boycotted the event through both terms in office. It was meant to be a night celebrating press freedom. Instead, the glamour-packed ballroom descended into confusion and fear.
Tables getting flipped over, guys running in with guns, and they were screaming, "Get down!" It was a pretty crazy, unique experience.
I just want to go.
As CCTV images captured a suspect shooting and running towards the event just one floor up. Investigators confirmed a man opened fire, injuring a Secret Service agent who was later released from hospital. America is now asking, who is the shooter who was able to get that close to the President of the United States? It's been reported that the suspect is 31-year-old Cole Thomas Allen from California, seemingly a popular teacher, a graduate, a games developer. Investigators believe he was a guest at the hotel. Allen is due in court tomorrow. So why?
What we believe happened, at least as of now, is that the suspect traveled by train from Los Angeles to Chicago and then Chicago to Washington, D.C., where he checked into the hotel where the Correspondents' Dinner was at. We're still investigating motive, and that's something that will necessarily take a couple of days at least. We believe that he was targeting administration officials.
Back at the Hilton, Trump wanted to carry on, but instead...
The president will be having a press briefing at the White House in 30 minutes. That is not a joke.
Are you concerned about political violence? This could be politically motivated.
All violence. I'm concerned about everything. Look, but I can't be so concerned that you can't function. No, I'm here. Nobody told me this was such a dangerous profession. If Marco would have told me, maybe I wouldn't have run. Maybe I would have said, I'll take a pass.
The president said the attempted attack was a compliment.
I've studied assassinations, and I must tell you, the most impactful people, the people that do the most, you take a look at the people, Abraham Lincoln, I mean, you go through the people that have gone through this, where they got them. And I hate to say I'm honored by that, but...
One that supported his ambitions.
I didn't want to say this, but this is why we have to have all of the attributes of what we're planning at the White House. It's actually a larger room, and it's much more secure. It's drone-proof, it's bulletproof glass. We need the ballroom. That's why Secret Service, that's why the military are demanding it.
President Trump has just left the podium. Clearly a really scary night for him, for his family, for the cabinet who were up there, but also seizing the political opportunity out here within an hour and arguing that this only happens to people who are having impact, saying he won't be deterred. America has seen Trump in this situation before. Nearly 2 years ago, he survived an assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, as a candidate. Afterwards, his ratings soared. At a moment in which his popularity has been so badly damaged by the war in Iran, he will be hoping that this shooting may provide another key turning point in his presidential ambitions. While the motive for last night's event remains unclear, President Trump has faced 2 previous attempts on his life. And while the vast majority of Americans say they oppose political violence, the killing of activist Charlie Kirk last year underlined that the risk to high-profile individuals is serious. Simeon Brown reports.
On the campaign trail in 2024,
Take a look at what happened.
this was President Trump's close encounter with a gunman. Far from the last for the president and the country. In America, political violence is older than the flag. It has taken the lives of campaigners like Martin Luther King and even presidents, with 4 murdered in office. John F. Kennedy, the last in 1963, but not for a lack of plots. This was the attempt on Ronald Reagan in 1981. Here, the press secretary, Jim Brady, was paralyzed outside the same building as the White House press dinner. Today, those campaigning in his name condemned America's enduring crisis.
Political violence with firearms is a real reality in America. I think what it really reflects is, just like every other type of violence in America, whether it's domestic violence, like we just saw in Shreveport where 8 children were killed, community violence, self-harm, suicide, it's all escalated so quickly into lethal violence because of unfettered access to firearms in this country.
But despite this, the country's commitment to firearms has remained stubborn, even among victims. This was Trump ally and right-wing activist Charlie Kirk last September, advocating gun rights. Moments later, he was fatally shot. Although violence has hit those across the divide, guns are a defining icon of the rights culture war. And there has even been support expressed for ICE officers who have fatally killed those who have shown dissent. Political violence has festered in the divided states of America. Is political violence, is it escalating due to increasing polarization in America?
Yeah, I think the US has always accepted more political violence than other similar democracies. In fact, we know that threats to Congress are up tenfold since 2016, which is really scary. Easy access to guns makes these threats far more lethal. Again, we saw that with Melissa and Mark Hortman. But we can't stop just at condemning the political violence alone. We have to recognize that rejecting political violence fundamentally requires addressing the roles of guns. We have more guns than people in this country. We can't lose sight of what is at the root of these horrific acts. What makes these acts so much more dangerous and lethal? Our nation's easy access to guns.
At the Washington press dinner, where shots were fired, there were no fatalities. A small mercy in a country where an estimated 47,000 people were killed by guns last year. But as President Trump escapes his 3rd encounter with a gunman, the question is, in this country, just what will it take for those with power to reform America's access to guns?
Joining me now are Anne McElvoy of Politico, who was at the dinner last night, and former US Secret Service agent Tim Miller, who in his career has protected dozens of events at last night's venue. Anne, let me just start with you. You were in the room, you were waiting for Donald Trump to give a speech he said was going to be controversial, inappropriate about journalists. Instead, chaos. What did you see?
Well, actually, I was just outside the doors. There are 2 sort of ways that people experienced this, Anushka. And in my case, I'd just gone out. I was going to pick up a bag and something that I needed for Kit. And so I was really at the top of the escalators in the lobby, where we have to assume that the gunman had somehow managed to cross that lobby and then got downstairs, either by the escalators, by back steps. We don't know at the moment. But basically, if you like, I was sort of right above it rather than through the door. So what we heard was we were just simply told there was a rush of security staff. I mean, I think the woman next to me said, I think it's a medical emergency. So we all pressed ourselves to the walls, and then more and more security came. And then they really did start to shout, get out of the way, get out of the way. And, a few curse words, as we say here, were flying. And I think we realized then it was probably a threat or a protester. But because he was sort of at the top of the escalator, and you've seen that dramatic footage of what was going as you went further down towards the door, at where he was apprehended and where the shots rang out, it's all very physically close, but there was so much noise and so much chaos. It was pretty hard to tell what was going on immediately. And we were bundled out, and we realized once we were outside what it.
Thanks, Anne. And Tim, you know that hotel really well, don't you? From what you've seen, how far did the shooter get, and did it surprise you?
Yeah, it actually got way too far again. And I think it speaks to the Secret Service. You know, the Secret Service is proactive. The whole mission is to make sure we do wise advance work and to stop an event like this from happening. We saw it in Butler, we saw it in Palm Beach, and now here we see it again. And it does speak to how the Secret Service is doing business. Let me tell you, if 3 strikes don't make you wake up and say, hey, we do have a genuine, real, actual threat against the president everywhere he goes, I don't know what's going to cause that to happen.
And did you, Tim, from what you've seen of the footage that's been put out there, spot anything that jumped out at you as particularly unusual?
Yeah, of course, there were a lot of things that are unusual. You see, the Secret Service starts from the curb in, creating barriers or what we would call rings of protection. In this case, it was a mag checkpoint, which is closer to the actual event. And a person with a handgun and a shotgun ran down the hall. Well, that would be a clue for a Secret Service agent. But the real question is, where were the counter surveillance units? Again, I've been at that hotel. I've probably done 100 advances there. It's a difficult place to secure, but the Secret Service does it at that building probably 50 to 100 times a year. So the question becomes, who are the current Secret Service agents? And like we saw in Butler, abysmal failure. Why is this mission, which is so critically important, continuing to fail? And I would suggest the Secret Service has to be reorganized, rethought, retrained. Who are we hiring to protect the president?
Let me come back to you on that, but Anne, can I just ask you, you can't overstate, can you, the concentration of power in that room?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. 2,500 people, you know, the cream, I mean to say, sorry, getting ahead on the royal visit there, of UK, US, transatlantic media, corporates. There's a lot of corporate presence in the room. The cabinet this year was the 30th anniversary of the dinner. Donald Trump's had a difficult relationship with it. He thinks a lot of the mainstream media is against him. He rails about that. He's also got a very, very checkered, in some ways, very reprehensible record on the First Amendment, on free speech. He's been targeting a lot of critical journalists. So there was already a pretty charged expectation of what was going to happen. And that had drawn in a lot of people. The cabinet were there, the American cabinet. We had J.D. Vance was there. He was rushed off stage.
Do you think it will boost his presidency, Anne?
Absolutely, in the short term. I think these things always do. I think, as we were just hearing about Butler, you know, I was actually covering that afterwards. I was there the day after when the president arrived in Milwaukee after the fight response. And very different president last night, and much more emollient. But yes, it will boost him in the short term.
Tim, can I ask you very quickly, Tim, one question as well? These are lone shooters, but surely the risk to the president could be something much more serious.
That's exactly the point, 100%. These have been amateurs. And by the way, I think we should focus a lot more on the sick minds that are pulling the trigger, what's causing that, than we are on the overall argument of the weapons itself. And to your point, we have much more dangerous and lethal adversaries out here. The Secret Service has to step up.
Okay, Tim, Anne, thank you so much for your time.